Yo guys, Gamers Pokemon Center here, and today I will be doing a guide on IVs and IV breeding. Now, this is partially a breeding guide, so if you guys are here for the IV part of a breeding guide, I'll have an annotation on screen, or if you're on a mobile device, then timeline in the description for that part. And this is a new series that I'm trying out. It's called G.P.C. Academy, Gamers Pokemon Central Academy. It's basically guides and things like that. But yeah, let's get into the basics of IV breeding. And not IV breeding, sorry, IVs. IVs stand for individual values. IVs range from 0 to 31. So as an example, let's say you give 3 people a box of 31 chocolates. You give 3 boxes, 31 chocolates to 3 different people. One person might eat 0 of those chocolates, one person might eat 23, one person might eat all of those 30. And that's basically how IVs are. They're also randomized. Another thing about IVs is that they cannot be changed once the Pokemon is generated, example, hatched or caught. Now, the IVs themselves cannot be changed, but there are ways to sort of make it seem like they are those IVs. Legitimately through the game without hacking, but I'll get to that later. And these are numbers you see on the side of a screen when your Pokemon levels up. So this is not always the case, so I'm just going to show you guys a little part over here. You guys can see this little box over here. Now this is not just IVs, it's also EVs. Now the IVs part of this is if you just like hatch or catch a Pokemon, hatch or catch a Pokemon. Those are basically the stats. And if you use a rare candy on them, like they get the boost up there. But some of this part is also EVs, which I'll get to in a different video. Sorry for the inconvenience, but yeah. Here's some other useful info, but it is not necessary when it comes to IVs, but it's also good to have. IVs are not the only factor to a strong Pokemon. If you want to make a strong Pokemon, there's also ability, nature, EVs, and things like that. Also, it takes a lot, and I mean a lot of time invested to get perfect IVs, like maybe 4, 5, 6 IVs, depends on what Pokemon you want. It takes a long time to get there, so don't expect you getting this in maybe like 1 hour or something like that. For me, it usually takes a couple days, 2 weeks. And now this part is really useful if you want legitimate IV Pokemon or legitimate shiny Pokemon, which this video is not really about. But 6 IV Pokemon on the GTS are most likely scams or hacked Pokemon that you would get. Also, 6 IV Pokemon on the Wonder Trade are most likely hacked. Now, some people accidentally trade away their 6 IVs, or they get one with the wrong ability. Trust me, I should know. And they want to trade them away. But if you get like a shiny 6 IV Pokemon, it's most likely hacked. If you get a shiny 5 IV Pokemon, it's most likely hacked off the Wonder Trade. And if you see like a Twitch streamer like Gozlov or something like that, trading away 6 IV shiny Pokemon, it's most likely hacked. And you don't want to get those Pokemon if you are going for legitimate IV shinies and things like that. But here's some not necessary info, but info that's also pretty good to have when you are dealing with IVs. If you don't have a certain level, IV, you can Hyper Train once the Pokemon is level 100, but those stats don't get passed down. So as I said over here on this area, they cannot be changed once the Pokemon is generated, example, hatched, caught. Well, they can sort of be changed with Hyper Training, not the IVs themselves, but they get Hyper Trained as if they are, they have 31 IVs in that stat, but it's not like they actually have them, but it's still a good way if you get that Pokemon level 100. And power items and the Destiny Knot are great items to pass down IVs through breeding, which I'll get to the breeding part in the next little part. But yeah, here are some things that you want to think about before breeding for IVs. And if you just skip that annotation, we went through some pretty important stuff about breeding and things you may want to know, so you might want to check out that little part back there. But yeah, First, choose a Pokemon that you want to breed. Next, can you SOS chain for it? Think about that. And why I'm asking you to do this, and think why it's available on SOS chain in Sun and Moon, is because you can get IVs through that, and we'll get to that a little later. But what egg group is it in? Because this is very essential. With the last question, which I'll get to, but this is a very essential thing to know. So go on Bulbapedia, search up your Pokemon, and find which egg group it's in, and that will depend on what Pokemon you're breeding with it. Now, is it male only, is it female only, or is it genderless? Now, this is very important if you are breeding it, because if it's any of those three, then that means you're going to need a ditto if you are going to breed for that Pokemon. Now, what stats am I going to need? This is probably the most essential part of it, knowing what stats you're going to need, because if you're IV breeding, you're going to need to know what stats you're going to have. And you're also going to need to think about what are you going to use as a base, and I'll get to that in a little second. But here's just one little thing that you might want to get before you start IV reading. You want to go over to the battle tree, and you want to talk to the ace trainer after you patch 20 eggs, and he will give you the judge function for your PC, which is very essential. So I will link a guide down in the description if you guys want to see that. But yeah, now once you got all of that down, here's a little disclaimer. This is the way that I do it. There are other ways to do it. I find this one the easiest because it is very simple, and I find this the quickest way to do it. Of course, there are other ways, but I find them more time consuming. So here is the first step. SOS chain for a ditto. I'll link a useful guide in the description if you guys want to see a guide on that. But go for the IVs that you want. If you don't get the IVs that you want in the first try, then keep on going for it. Now, you probably won't get a 5 IV instantly, but you are going to be guaranteed a 4 IV with this method, and I'll link down below another guide. But this is what you're going to use as a base, and this was one of the questions that I had you think, and this is what most people use as a base, because dittos is very easy to obtain, and now you can get high IV dittos in like 5-10 minutes. So it makes breeding for Pokemon with ditto and using ditto as a base one of the easiest methods to breed Pokemon. Now, step number 2 is to get the Destiny Knot via pickup or battle points. I use pickup because you're going to need those battle points for competitive items such as Assault Vests, choice items, Rocky Helmets, etc. And basically what the Destiny Knot will do is that it will make 5 IVs get passed down in total. 3 from the Pokemon holding it and 2 from the other parent Pokemon, which is really essential. But this will be used to pass the IVs down from the Ditto and the other parent to the offspring. Now here are some steps. Now my example is Snivy, and this is actually what I'm breeding for. And yeah, so step number 1, give the Destiny Knot to the Ditto that you got through SOS with the desirable IVs. Now just give it to the Ditto, because then 3 of those stats, and it might be one of the bad stats, it might be one of the good stats, really depends at how lucky you are. But yeah, it's going to get passed down. Now step 2 is to put the 2 parents in the daycare. The Ditto with the other Pokemon, again, just as I said, I'm using Snivy, so that is my example. And if you have a desirable stat on the Pokemon, one other thing that you can do, but this is not personally what I do, is that you can give a power item to that Pokemon that is having it, because then it will have a 100% chance of passing down that certain IV, which is very essential for a Trick Room user, or just a Stolly tank, and that's what is used a lot in the G.P.C format. Now, step 3 is after you've hatched a couple of eggs and you've got a Pokemon that has better IVs. So let's say I got a Ditto with HP, Special Attack, Special Defense, and Speed, but I bred with it with it a Snivy that has HP, defense, and speed. Then what I can do is I can swap out the Snivy with the original parent, and then there you go. I will be breeding Ivies from the new Snivy rather than the old one. And step 4, which is the final step, is to keep breeding and swapping Pokemon until you get a perfect 5 IV Pokemon. Just as I mentioned, it takes a very long time to get a perfect 5 IV Pokemon, or maybe even 6 IV Pokemon. But some things that you can do before is counting the IVs and what are the possibilities of the offspring having, and what are the chances of that offspring having that certain IV count. And that is very necessary. That way you sort of breed the right Pokemon together and make the right pairs. And yeah, guys, if you enjoyed that video, don't forget to like this video if it helped you out, and subscribe for more guides like this one. And this is just the first guide of the G.P.C. Academy. So if you guys want to participate or learn more of these things, is subscribe and ring that little bell. That way you would get notified every single time I upload a video. It might not always be a G.P.C. Academy video, but yeah, guys, Gamers Pokemon.